Size definitely matters when it comes to notebook selection and journaling. It might even help the way you think. Thank you for joining me today on Journaling with Steve for this fourth installment of my 6-part series on how to pick a journal. I am super excited about today's comment because I'm going to share with you a breakthrough that I had in journaling that has really revolutionized the way I approach journaling. And I think it can help you too. In today's video, we're going to be looking at 5 of the most common notebook sizes and how they might help you in your own journaling process. Let's dive right into the first notebook. I've got a couple of props here on the desk, and that's to help you see dimensions. The primary examples that I'm going to be using today are from the Leuchtturm 1917 brand and Midori MD. Midori MD is the popular brand used in traveler's notebooks, for instance. And Leuchtturm 1917 is the ubiquitous dominant brand in the marketplace for high quality notebooks. I want to start by saying that most notebook manufacturers, Leuchtturm included, have a smaller pocket notebook called an A7 that's smaller yet than what I'm about to show you. But I find that it's just actually a little bit too small. This is an A6. Its dimensions are 90 millimeters this away and 150 millimeters this away, or 3 3/4 inches by 5 13/16. This 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper is sitting here so that you can have a point of reference as a visual. This is the one notebook that I say is a must-have. Every other size is optional, but you must have this or the A7 pocket. You've got to have one version of a pocket notebook, and I'm going to show you why. And I'm going to venture into a little aside, a little bit of a rabbit trail here for just a second, but this is an absolute pro tip. These notebooks are great for to-do lists, for what I call a catch-all notebook, which is where you've got a thought and you don't have your regular notebook with you, so you're just going to jot it down. You're not going to have time to work out the whole thought necessarily. Although in a pinch, you can actually full-blown journal in one of these. I've done it before. So here's how it works. You're journaling along and you think of something that you've got to do. Rather than pausing and writing it down in your to-do list notebook, you're going to write it right in the body of your regular notebook, whatever you're journaling in, and make a margin note and come back to it later. Let me show you why. Sidebar. This is my notebook bag. It's what I carry every day. And in it, unless I'm on a trip or something, I keep my traveler's notebook. My traveler's notebook contains 5 items. One is a little calendar. Then I've got my ideation notebook, which is an A5 Midori. This is where I develop my Instagram and YouTube content. And I've got my commonplace book, which we'll be talking about at length in a future video. And I've got my book of lists. I've got my once, lent, borrowed books and audiobooks that I'm working on, my pen inventory, lists. We'll be talking about that in a future video also. And then my day-to-day notebook. So I'm sitting down to journal, okay? I've got my A6 by my side. That's always going to be handy. And I'm working on a YouTube idea. This is the only writing I'm going to be doing in today's video. And I'm just going to write some nonsense for the sake of this example, okay? I was Okay, see, I'm marking my margin here because something just popped into my head that I've got to do. And I'm just going to write tripod. Then I'm going to pick right back up. Oh, just had another thought. Okay, the point is, don't stop journaling. By doing this, you can keep your flow going. You don't have to interrupt your thought. You can just jot something down so that it frees your mind so you can keep right on journaling. This is a pro tip. I hope you make note of it. So now, I've finished my journaling session. I've made my margin notes, and I'm going to grab my A6. Okay? I'm going to put today's date, whatever it is. I don't even know what it is yet. And then I'm going to get tripod and bananas. With me? All right. And then I'm going to blot so I can close my books. By the way, while I'm at it, you notice that I've got these weird gloves on my hands. So I journal a lot and I write letters a lot. And I used to go like this. I'd use a piece of blotter paper, put it under my hand, and then that way I could write without getting hand oils on the page. Okay? Have you ever had skipping where you're writing along and all of a sudden, for whatever reason, the pens just won't write? Or you've got your hand on this page, on this side of the page, holding the page down, right? And you pick up your hand and you see that the ink's reactivating and it's starting to spread. That's from hand oils. Okay? And the way to prevent that is to keep something under your hand. You can go like this. You can drop a rag there, another page. But I discovered these artist's gloves. They're extremely affordable. I usually keep a short one and a long one. Sometimes I'll wear two long ones. They're like $6 or $7 a pair on Amazon. This brand is called Traki, Traki. They're so light I don't even notice that I've got them on my hands. But anyway, ever since I started wearing these artist's gloves, I don't have hand oil issues anymore. Very rarely do I have a skipping issue with a fountain pen. Okay, so lucky you got a peek at my traveler's notebook. I've shown you how to use the A6 notebook effectively. And again, I say that every other notebook is optional in terms of size. You can pick any size you want, but you've got to have one of these. Next is the B6. The Leuchtturm B6 is a fairly unusual size in the B6 world. It's 125 millimeters this way by 190 this way, or 5 inches by 7.5 inches. This size is the first size that I consider large enough to use blank paper with. I call this my nightstand notebook. And the reason is, it's a great size to keep in your nightstand. Do you ever have a problem trying to get to sleep because something pops into your mind and you're afraid you're going to forget it? Sometimes I call it the 2 o'clock oopsie, where you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and you've got this thought, you're like, oh no, what am I going to do? So I just roll over and pull out this nightstand notebook. I also use it for my evening reflections. That's a practice where just before going to sleep, I'll write down one story-worthy moment of the day. Usually just one sentence with a couple of details to be able to remember for a storytelling moment later on. I got that idea from Matthew Dix's book called Storyworthy. Which is a remarkable book, by the way. So this is the Leuchtturm B6. I generally keep 2 B6s at bedside. One is ruled, sometimes graph paper, but usually ruled. And the other one is blank, because I do a lot of mind mapping journaling. And so this size is just big enough to start a mind map. So, mind mapping is this deal, right? So I won't do a full mind mapping exercise, but I'll do a little one. And then that way I've got enough to start on the next day. I can get back to this mind mapping activity in a larger notebook, and I can sleep without wondering, what am I going to forget? That's the Leuchtturm B6, but check this out. This is the Midori B6. See, it's a little bit smaller. I put off getting one of these for the longest time, and now that I have one, it is fantastic. I use it a lot for day hikes because, check this out, it's actually small enough to fit in my hip pocket. when I don't want to carry my notebook bag, I can carry it in my hip pocket. Or if I want to take it to a business meeting and I'm having to dress up with a suit and tie, it fits in my breast pocket. It's a very handy size, and Midori paper is, that's my favorite. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful paper. And these things, you know, I can even put this size in the smaller compartments of my notebook bag. Voila. And there they go. The next size we're going to look at is the ubiquitous A5. A5 is really interesting. It's the one size of notebook that is standardized. Every notebook brand is going to vary on every other size by a large margin, like you just saw in that B6. That's a pretty big difference in size. The A5, it's only going to be off by 1, 2, 3 millimeters between brands. And the reason for that is the A5 notebook came out in 1975. Paper companies internationally were trying to standardize popular paper sizes for shipping and shelving purposes around the world, so they could develop these compartments to fit things very specifically so that the paper wouldn't, bend and get ruined and stuff like that. Well, at that same time, paper manufacturers realized that the A4 size, which is commonly known as the 8.5 by 11 in the US, is just too large to carry around all the time. It's too large to write letters on. In fact, some smart person realized that A4 is just about twice the size of what we really need. So here's how an A5 came into being. See this? An A5 is an A4 cut in half. See that? Kind of cool, kind of interesting. This is a Leuchtturm A5, and this is a Midori A5. See that? Almost identical in size. The Midori is just a skosh bigger on that edge. Not much. A5 notebooks can really be used for just about anything, any format. My favorite uses are as the day-to-day. I use them a lot for diary entries, a little bit of deep thinking too. Not a whole lot, but a little bit. I use it for goal setting, for ideation, my commonplace notebook, my book of lists. I'll also use it in spiral bound for taking notes at classes and such. It's a very popular size for bullet journaling as well, which is most commonly done on dot grid or graph paper. Super handy, right? Comfortable in the hand, very light. The A5 is ubiquitous, and there's a reason for it. Lots of reasons for it. I'll just drop these into my notebook bag. Next up, we have the B5, and I want to show you size variations again here. This is a Leuchtturm. It's a dot grid format. It is 178 millimeters by 254 millimeters, or 7 by 10. The B5 notebook just isn't very popular anymore, and that's probably why it's my favorite. I love taking this thing to coffee shops, the park, the library, any place where I've got a little bit of time, a little bit more time, and it can spread out just a little bit. This is a Redicy. You see it's a little bit larger this way. But I want to show you something here. These also fit very nicely into my notebook bag, by the way. See that? Comfortably. I love B5 notebooks that are between 90 and 120 pages long because they do this. They lay super flat and just keep on going. I picked up quite a few of these Redicy B5 notebooks on sale on Black Friday, actually, because they were like $7.99 a piece. They've got a great toothy feel. That's not the subject of this video. Let me get back on track here. The B5. And this bag is getting full, but it still fits very nicely. Now, the last size we're going to talk about also has a lot of variation in size between the notebook manufacturers. It's the A4. Unless you're an architect or a musician or an artist with a sketch pad, it's unlikely that you're going to carry around an A4. But I want you to put your thinking caps on because I'm going to share with you a life-changing pro tip. First, let me show you the difference between these A4s. These are all A4 notebooks. They're substantially different in size. First, we'll look at the Leuchtturm Master A4 Plus. This thing is a beast. 225 millimeters this way, 315 millimeters this way, or 8 7/8 inches by 12 1/4 inches. It's so big, I don't even know if I can keep it in frame here. The next is the Retici, which is just a lovely book to write with. By the way, all the Leuchtturm products are going to have numbered pages and an index. Here's an index. You can see down here, numbered pages. This is the Retici A4. Wonderful softcover notebook. See, it's shorter and narrower than the A4 Plus Master by Leuchtturm. It also features numbered pages and an index, similar to the Leuchtturm design, and very similar page coloration as well. And then lastly is the Midori A4. It is a little bit smaller yet. This is my notebook of choice. It's only 48 pages long, and I can get 28,564 words into it. That's for another video. So for $10, I can fill up 2 of these books, or for $35, 1 of these. See? So there's value here. Now, let me tell you my pro tip and life-changing moment. By now, you've probably realized that I journal a lot, and I use every notebook size there is. And in any given year, I'm going to fill up quite a few notebooks. I review my notebooks frequently, and at the end of the year, I'll usually read through most of my notebooks for the year, and then rehash prior notebooks to look for recurring themes, look for how I've grown, continue developing ideas that I've had in certain topics. 10 years ago, I started creating stacks out of notebooks, and it went like this. I would have a stack for goals and productivity. I would have a stack for time management thoughts. I would have a stack for deep thinking. I would have a stack for journaling my way out of depression. And so I would create these stacks, and then that way I could really focus my attention on a given topic. And I don't mean that I journal specifically in these ideas. What I mean to say is that as I was glancing through my journals, I would notice that one journal seemed to have some really good material on this topic, so I would put it in this stack. Another journal would have, some better material on this topic, so I would put it in that stack. Not to say that it was exclusive, but it seemed to have better material. So I started doing that about 10 years ago, and it's a really, really helpful enterprise. But it wasn't until 2 years ago that I was doing this activity that I caught something visual that I'd never. It was so obvious. I'm thinking, how on earth did I miss this for all those years? So I'm looking at these stacks, and I decide, I'm going to look at my goals and productivity stack, and I'm flipping through it, and I realize, holy cow, all these notebooks are A5s, except for that one B6. And then I looked over at my deep thinking stack. They were all A4s. So I decided I'm going to focus on that stack for a little while. I'm reading through this stack, and I'm like, those are my best thoughts. And I look at a B5, my B5s are like my next best thoughts. So I realized, big book, big thought. My best thinking was taking place in the larger books. Now, sometimes I might have the seed of a thought, and it would start in an A7 or an A5, and then I would eventually work it out in the A4. Now, why is that? I bet there are scientific or psychiatric reasons why this is the case. I don't know. I'm not a scientist or a psychiatrist, but I'm a journaler. I would say that practically speaking, here's what I'm thinking. When I crack open one of those big books, my brain just breathes a sigh of relief because it knows it's going to have some time to play. Because I'm not going to crack open that monstrosity unless I've got some room to roam. So once I realized this fact, that my best thinking was taking place in these larger notebooks, I decided to force the issue. I went to exclusively large notebooks. Well, that was a mistake, because it's like, all right, I've got this big notebook. Now think, damn you. It doesn't work like that. So I learned to just let it happen. Rather than trying to force myself to have these profound thoughts, just let it happen. I could be journaling in my A5, developing my to-do list for the day. I could be recording an audiobook or grilling some steaks or whatever. And at some point, usually once or twice a week, my mind will say, you know what, Steve? I need you to sit down with that A4 for a while. I've got some stuff I need to tell you, some thorny issues I need to work through, and I need to borrow your pen. And then I'll sit down and just let it go. Since I made this discovery in the last 2 years, I've had 3 occasions, just 3. And mind you, this is out of a couple hundred times. I've had 3 occasions where I actually sat down with a freshly inked Pilot Custom 823. For those of you who know the pen, it holds a rather large capacity of ink. I sat down and drained a freshly inked 823 in one sitting in those large notebooks. That's a lot of writing. Not only that, but at the end, and this is 3 occasions, I'm sharing this with you because I get really excited about it. I flipped back through all 14, 20 pages of what I just written, and there's not one scribble, there's not one spelling correction, there's not one punctuation correction. It was just boom for 4, 5, 6 hours of solid writing, just going. And I don't journal like that. I don't journal with the intent of not making a mistake, crying out loud. I've got scribbles sometimes on every single line of a page, but those 3 times in that big Leuchtturm A4 Plus Master on 100 GSM paper, it's their finest paper, by the way. We're just glorious. I hope that happens for you someday. You know, it's like a musician hitting that perfect note, hitting the walk-off grand slam in the World Series. It's just a great experience, and I hope you get to have that someday. All right, before I wrap up this video, if you've enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. If you know somebody who's thinking about purchasing a notebook, please send it to them and might give them a hand. I hope it's been helpful for you, and I hope that it helps you decide to either expand your collection to experiment with these different journaling methods. Maybe it'll even help you decide to incorporate some different sizes into your own journaling practice. Okay, to recap, you've got to have an A7 notebook. It's great for to-do lists, as a catch-all notebook, a place to jot down the seeds of ideas to be able to come back to later. Next is the B6. I call it my nightstand notebook. My sleeping pill. It's a handy, smaller size, also comfortable to drop into a handbag. The Midori B6 is comfortable in a pocket as well. It's my travel notebook that I use for day hikes and walking around a lake or something like that. The A5 is the ubiquitous journal. It dominates the market by a long shot. Nothing else approaches the A5 in terms of volume of sales. You can use it for anything. Bullet journaling, goal tracking, any format is comfortable. Blank paper, graph paper, dot grid, and ruled. And the A4 is wonderful for deep thinking. I really like to use blank paper in a spiral bound notebook for mind mapping with an A4 size. I'll talk to you about that in the spiral bound edition. So far in this 6-part series, I've offered 5 tips on journal selection. I talked about the importance of finding your why. Next, I talked about paper quality and finding options for under $20. In this video, we talked about dimensions. Stay tuned for my next video where I'm going to talk about brands and prices. Stay tuned.